flowers at the soldiers. It seemed that a lot of Austrians were quite happy to be a part of this new, powerful Germany. A short time later, some Jewish families from Austria showed up in Constance. By this time, there were laws, Nazi laws, of course, because it was a Nazi government, that said that Jews were not permitted to eat at restaurants or to live in hotels. So where were these people to stay? Well, we were asked if we would let one of the families, one of the Jewish families from Austria, stay at our apartment, which we agreed to. My parents agreed to. I didn't have a voice in those days. Yes, I was 13 years old. But those people told us what happened in Vienna, the capital of Austria that they came from, after the Germans took over their country, that gangs of Austrians marched through the streets, broke into Jewish homes, into Jewish stores, broke, stole, destroyed whatever they could put their hands on. In some cases, they took the people out onto the street and beat them publicly while the Austrian police was standing there watching, doing absolutely nothing to help or to protect these people. Now, this was 1938. We were shocked to hear this. We had been living under Hitler's rule for 5 years by this time, and nothing of this sort had happened in Constance. Economically, we were in bad shape because we'd lost our little store, but there had not been any violence. And here in some cities in Austria, violence was starting right at the beginning, right after the takeover. Why had they come to Constance? Well, you may recall that I said Constance is right on the border of Switzerland. These people who were staying with us that night had lost everything they ever owned except for the clothes they were wearing. The only thing they were concerned with now was getting out of the country, saving their lives. And they knew that Constance was on the border. They were hoping that somehow they would find a way of crossing that border and escaping into Switzerland. Well, it turned out they picked a good place for this effort. While the border between Germany and Switzerland consists of Lake Constance and the Rhine River, which flows through Lake Constance, the town of Constance itself, the old part of town, is on the south side of the Rhine River, on what you would be normally considered the Swiss side of the river. And the only natural barrier between Germany and Switzerland in that area was a little creek about, 5 or 6 feet wide, water maybe 2 inches deep, separating Germany from Switzerland in this one area. So on the following morning, my father took this family for about a 10-minute walk from where we lived and pointed to the little creek and said, "That's the border, good luck." And the people took 1 or 2 steps in the water and climbed out on the other side. It was that easy if you knew what to do and where to do it. Well, they must have decided to share that knowledge with their relatives and friends back in Austria. They must have headed for the nearest telephone because very soon we had lots of company. Every day, sometimes there'd be 2 or 3 people coming. Sometimes we had as many as 20 or more people staying overnight for purpose of being smuggled into Switzerland. After a while, a German police inspector of the local criminal police department showed up and offered his services to help us smuggle these people across the border. He knew exactly what we were doing, and he offered to help us do this. And after that, refugees from Austria who came to our apartment were actually driven across the border by taxi cab. And the only reward that the inspector expected was about $2.50 per person to pay for cab fare. This went on until August 1938, when the Swiss government decided to close the border. Anybody who escaped into Switzerland after that, anyone who crossed into Switzerland after that date illegally, was arrested by the Swiss police, taken back to the border, and handed over to the German border police. We found out very soon that from there they were sent directly to Dachau concentration camp. So we had to stop the smuggling operation. Later that year, in November of 1938, I was awakened by an explosion. What could have exploded in our peaceful little town of Constance, in our quiet neighborhood? Well, I ran to the window to look at the gas station across the street. I thought maybe they had blown up. No, nothing changed there. I finally ran to the back window, and there, looking across our backyard, where normally I would look at our synagogue, our Jewish church, on that morning, at that time, all I could see was a big wall of fire. I ran back into the apartment, told my parents what I'd seen. My parents ordered me to sit still, and our Christian landlady offered to go out and find out what was happening. She came back a few minutes later. She confirmed the obvious. Yes, the synagogue had been blown up by explosive charges, but there was more bad news. All the Jewish men in Constance had been arrested by the Gestapo. Well, my father was still sitting there, but it didn't take long. About half an hour later, there was a big knock on our door. 2 Gestapo agents had come to arrest my father. What were the charges for the police to arrest my father? There were no charges. The only crime my father had committed was to be Jewish. And as we learned later, some 30,000 Jewish men were arrested on that particular morning, which we refer to as Kristallnacht. And none of them had committed any crime other than the fact that they were born into a Jewish family. This was the first nationally organized roundup of Jewish people in Germany. They took my father away. We didn't know whether we'd ever see him again. We didn't know what they would do to him. We didn't know if they would come back and get the rest of us. We simply had no idea of what was happening, why it was happening, and certainly had no idea of what was going to happen next. We lived as well as we could without my father, and about a month later, he came back home. He was a very sick man. We could hardly recognize him anymore. He had been at Dachau concentration camp and was released again. In those days, concentration camps had not been converted into death camps yet. Their function was strictly keeping people in prison. So the 30,000 who were arrested, those who survive those conditions were released again anywhere from 1 to